Hey guys, how you going? Sifu here from Strange Encounters Downunder, and I've got Liam here from the haunts of Brisbane. Where are we, Liam? He takes me to all the awesome places, hey, I tell you.
Yeah, slightly off the beaten track here.
Slightly.
Sitting down a quite precarious embankment in a creek bed. So right at the very, very foot of what was up until 1880s officially was One Tree Hill. Continued on as One Tree Hill anecdotally, but is better known to everybody in Brisbane as Mount Cootha.
Yeah, so this place has some pretty dubious history, hasn't it, Liam? There's an unfortunate incident transpired here about, 92 years
92
to the
years
day.
ago to the day.
Almost actually on the hour, or at the particular time it's alleged to have occurred here. So, yeah.
So story-wise, it's probably one of the most pervasive urban legends or ghost stories about Brisbane. It's been around for many, many decades, and it has to do with a park that's in the area here. It's only just a couple of 100 metres up the road, and I think it probably seems to focus sort of around that area.
JC Slaughter.
Yep, JC Slaughter Falls. Slaughter Falls sounds pretty, pretty mysterious and a bit macabre, but it's JC Slaughter after James Cameron Slaughter, who was a town clerk. But it tends to be around sort of these little parks here, and a lot of people have said that they've had major experiences when they've driven into the park of seeing a fleeting female apparition sort of running screaming through the bush near the road where their car has been. People have reported was that noise?
We've been having dead set, guys, and everyone who does this sort of stuff, they always say stuff, we're hearing something in the bush, but we've consistently heard stuff since we've been down here. It's been pretty unsettling, actually. So yeah.
Quite unsettling, but a lot of people saying as well that they've been driving along sort of, quite slow on some of the access roads here.
Like Cassandra?
All of a sudden, out of the blue, there's a banging on the window, and they've looked up and there's a female apparition screaming and banging on the window of their car, literally trying to get into the car, begging for help. Now, lots of people have reported it. It's been an urban legend, probably not for the people who experienced it, but it has been around for many, many decades. But when we have a bit of a look into the history of the area, and I think a lot of people suspected that maybe there had been a murder here or somebody had been attacked here, and there definitely had been. Now, our story dates back all the way to November 16, today's date.
Yeah.
In 1927.
27.
And actually, I'll drop it now. At roughly about
almost this time,
8
guys.
p.m. So,
hey, Cosmic Girl, how you doing?
What are we now? We'd be
very close to 8. What is the
double check
time?
the
Anyone
time,
tell us the time? I can't do two things at once.
7:45. So
yeah,
we're literally
pretty close.
It was only postulated that it was 8 p.m. So it could be right at this very minute. However, it had to do with a young
Hey, Craig,
couple.
how you doing?
Yeah, young couple who were engaged to be married. They'd been engaged since January 1926. They were due to get married in January of 1928. One of them was by the name of Reginald Vaughan, the other one by Cecilia Miller, or Sissy Miller, as she was known to her friends and family. Now, the two of them, Reginald had borrowed his mother's car. Both of them lived up at Paddington, which is only about 5 minutes drive from here. And Reginald had promised that he was going to take Sissy out to the movies or somewhere, sort of her choice that she would like to go.
But he took it down here instead.
He brought her down here instead. Now, quite interestingly, I was just going through the case notes again today, because the reason that we're here is that we're only approximately 15 minutes off on the 92nd anniversary of when this murder occurred.
Wow.
Having a look, it rained earlier in the day on the 16th of November 1927, just like it did today in Brisbane.
Yeah.
At the time, photos that were taken subsequent to the event had a lot of police, big police contingent down here searching through the creek bed, which at the time was dry. And you were noticing there's a lot of erosion in the creek, so this would normally be full of water. It's not. It's absolutely bone dry. So the conditions 92 years ago were almost identical to the conditions
Hey,
tonight.
Michael from Germany, how you doing?
Which is,
It's
even
crazy.
more sort of...
the coincidences.
However, what sort of transpired next, no one sort of really understands. So the two of them hopped in the car and left their premises over at Paddington. They drove down here, that's a pretty much given, and there was a huge lantana stand that was just up above where we're standing now. In the
Hey Laurel,
creek
how you
bed.
doing?
Now, they parked the car in behind the lantana. Apparently both got out, sitting on the running board of the car, having a bit of a chat, until Reginald claims that a cloud came over his mind and pretty much everything, for the next little while at least, goes completely blank. Now, he was found the very next day, and he was found crawling up onto the road just above where we are here.
And we'll show you that too, guys, in a bit. We'll start panning around after we give you the gist of the story.
So a local farmer was herding some cattle down the road. He heard some rustling in the lantana. Thinking it was his son, he called out and he heard a bit of a mumble come. So he popped over, stuck his head underneath the lantana bushes, and lo and behold, here's this chap absolutely covered in blood, in a big black coat. He thought he might be a cab driver who'd been bottled or bumped on the top of the head and been attacked and dumped in the bushes. So he travelled up the road to a house that was being built, and shouted out to one of the labourers, "You've got to come down and have a look at what I've just found underneath the lantana bush." The builder came down, took one look at this chap and thought, God, he's had his throat slit, but funnily enough, or miraculously enough, he's still alive. But he mentioned to this farmer that, God, it's got nothing to do with us, it's not our problem, let's
Hey
get
Amy,
in
how you going?
contact with the local police. The police came down, finally were able to track this guy down. By that stage he'd crawled sort of a little bit further up the road under a tree, and everyone stated that he had what looked like a rather large wound on the back of his head. He stank like Lysol, which was a poison that was used back in the 1920s and 1930s, and he was very hurriedly rushed off to hospital by the ambulance.
Was our little friend from before?
Yeah, could have been the possum. But he was rushed off to the hospital, and the police sort of made a bit of a wider search of the area, and they came across the car that was parked up in behind the lantana. And unfortunately, they also found the body of Sissy Miller. She was laying face down, had clearly been there for some time, and had a gunshot wound to the back of her head. Now, the police spread out in amongst the creek bed. They found lots of footprints and tracks coming down into the creek bed, pretty much right where we're standing, as best I can figure from the case notes at the time. They found a empty bottle of Lysol poison. There was a pocket knife, there was a fold-up comb, and there was a 5-shot American revolver that was sitting just up on the bank, not far from where we are now, with 2 spent cartridges in it and 3 live rounds as well. Now, when they went and had a bit more of a questioning with old Reginald at the hospital, it was found that he had a very large laceration on the back of his neck, so just below the hairline. But the doctors were able to actually extract bullet fragments out the back, so it was clear that he'd been shot in the back of the head as well.
Hang on a second. He shot himself in the back of the head,
So
in the centre.
this is
Right in the centre.
This is where it becomes truly bizarre. Now, he didn't seem to remember anything that happened. He completely skipped out between having a chat to his fiancée on the running board of the car and pretty much the next morning. But he claimed that he thinks he may have swallowed some Lysol poison, and he also claimed that he thought he had shot himself.
But he didn't recall actually acquiring the poison, did he?
No.
At all. So where'd the poison come from,
No one seems to know where the poison came from. In the subsequent court case and inquest, his mother said that there was Lysol around their house.
But there was Lysol. It was commonly
Everybody
used.
had it. It was a common household chemical. He also claimed that he'd bought the revolver about 12 months previously just for protection and had it in the car. However,
Hey, Sally.
both his parents claim that they had no knowledge of him ever having owned a firearm, and he couldn't tell the police where he'd purchased it from. He didn't remember purchasing it, apart from he thought he'd had it for about 12 months.
There's a lot of hazy stuff here, guys. It's like, oh.
So very, very hazy. Now, so we're left with a very unfortunate dead body sitting on the side of the road just above us. A chap who apparently drank a lot of poison and shot himself in the back of the head, who'd crawled through this creek bed right where we're standing and back up onto the road and was found the next morning.
I'll tell you guys, look, when we pan around soon and you'll see it, it's the terrain here. It would be no mean feat to actually do that with a bullet, a point blank bullet wound to the back of the head. To be able to do that,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
phenomenal. Now, the police were never really able to figure out a motive for the event. Quite unusually, Sissy Miller's parents, the father, definitely thought it was out of character. He hadn't noticed anything unusual about Reginald. The mother believe that they may have had a couple of tiffs, but really nothing of any major note. However, Sissy's sister, I think her name was Isabella, gave a completely different account of events. Now, she claimed that she'd heard Reginald claim that he was going to shoot her, shoot Sissy and shoot himself on multiple occasions. They'd had multiple fights, but she really seemed to be the only person involved in the whole affair that was telling this story. Everyone else seemed to say that it was completely out of character for Reginald, and he was still declaring that he had no knowledge of what had happened, and pretty much had testified that he accepted that he must have done it, because who else would have done it, despite the fact that he didn't remember doing any of it at all.
Wow.
Now, before the court case and the inquest were finished, he was actually declared criminally insane, and he was sent over to Goodna Insane Asylum, or Goodna sort of mental asylum.
And it seems like everything either starts or finishes at Goodna.
It does. So he was given a 14-year stretch over at the Goodna Asylum. Now, everyone sort of, I'm sure, was quite peeved that no one had actually, despite the fact he'd been charged, he hadn't been found guilty because he didn't make it to the end of the court case. And everyone was quite perturbed by that. But sooner or later, everything settled down right through until 1941. So a lot of crunching and crashing going on over there.
That was like a heavier footfall. That's no possum. Anyway, let's finish the story up, dude.
So, in 1941, he came due for release from Goodna Mental Asylum. When he came due for release, there was actually a huge public petition. It hit the newspapers again and was quite sensational, that because he wasn't able to see out the rest of the court case back in 1928, it jumped years because it took him a little while to recover in hospital before they could actually try him. Because he'd never seen the entire court case out, a lot of people felt that he should sort of answer that sentence, or answer sort of to the murder of Sissy Miller again. Very fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on which side of the fence you sat on at that time in 1941, he was released without charge, and ended up moving back out west where he'd originally come from. Quite bizarrely, the only motive that police could come up with, and even then it was a bit of a stretch of the imagination, was that poor old Reginald, given that he was only about 2 months out from marrying Cecilia, because he didn't have much money in the bank, he decided to pop off his fiancée and also kill himself, because he had no means of support for her. Now, Reginald's mother and father believed that he should have had about £200 to £300 in his bank. The police believe that it was probably more like about £21, but even then in 1927, £21 was still quite a bit of money. So he was by no means destitute, but again was the only motive that they could possibly think of. But again, yeah, quite a vague motive.
I'm going to spin this around so you can have a little bit of a look at the terrain, if we can get some light. On this one, a bit of a waddle around. So we'll just show the embankment. How just getting a message saying your broadcast was interrupted. Yes, it was interrupted. We don't know what the go is there, but anyway, we're back on. So you can have a look, see just how steep that embankment is that he's actually crawled up, which is absolutely no mean feat. We'll have a bit of a waddle down the creek bed. Which way do you want to go? We'll go left, hey?
I was going to say, I'll grab this other torch because the light's a little bit more diffused.
Yeah. So we've been getting a lot of activity in the scrub over this side, and this is pretty much where, and I'll try not to,
throw that one on.
There we go. I'll just try not to land on my butt here, just from this dry creek bed that we're making our way. So what we have really is the makings of an awesome urban legend. We've got a lady that was pretty much executed in dubious circumstances at this location, and we're about 200 metres away from JC Slaughter, where this apparition's been quite routinely observed by people parking out there.
It has multiple times over at least the last 20 or 30 years.
Thanks for coming back, guys. Sorry about that interrupt. We don't know what happened there, but we're actually getting quite a little bit of activity in the scrub here, which is unusual. We found a couple of possums before, but we're hearing stuff that's a hell of a lot heavier than that in the bush. what we're pointing at before. And we'll actually just pan around and show you this creek bed. So this is where we're based at the moment. So this is Ithaca Creek, and I'm pointing in the direction of, so we've got the towers on my right, so this road here.
So to our left, as the video is going, we have sort of Sir Samuel Griffith Drive that now wends its way all the way up to the top of the summit of Mount Cootha.
Does that curve straight ahead too?
Yep, curves straight ahead, sort of off to the left, right at the very end where you can sort of see that orange line. Now, back in 1927, the road to our left was actually called Mount Cootha Road, and Sir Samuel Griffith Drive was called the Summit Road. So it ran all the way up to the summit, and then directly to our right, and we're about to have a car go sort of along that road, is Simpson's Road. Now,
so Simpson's Road up here.
Simpson's Road has been there for forever and a day, and winds all the way up into Bardon.
Right, so here you've got this guy with an alleged point-blank bullet wound to the centre or the back of his head, which is a bit incredulous to start off with, really. And he's managed to survive that and crawl out of the scrub.
And apparently drinking a bottle of Lysol
poison as well.
Now,
so
quite another really unusual part of this whole case is that Joseph Espy Dodds, who was the chief government medical officer at the time and an incredibly learned medical man, had actually examined Reginald Leopold Vaughan when he was at the hospital. Now, he had lots of brown burns around his mouth and also in the back of his throat, which were fairly telltale that he'd consumed some kind of poison. However, when they did a swab around his mouth, they couldn't actually find any trace of Lysol at all, despite the fact he smelled like Lysol, but they couldn't actually definitively say that he'd drunk any.
So what do you reckon, Liam? Maybe a stitch-up?
So very, very unusual.
So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to pack up from here shortly, after giving you a bit of an idea of what the lay of the land is. We're going to head up to JC Slaughter and actually have a bit of a waddle around there, being the 92nd anniversary of this incredible incident that's taken place here, and we'll just see what might transpire. You never know, the conditions are pretty much identical.
Absolutely identical to 1927.
And we might actually come across some people out that way that may have actually seen something themselves while we're up there. We'll have to do spooky torch faces. Spooky torch faces, there you go. So we're going to make our way up to JC Slaughter and see what's going on there, but geez, it's an eerie feeling down here. All of a sudden it's like really
eerie.
Eerie, heavy, wow. So, rightio, so stay with us, we'll be back on air shortly and we'll see what happens up there. You do a real spooky face with your torch, Liam. There you go.
God. That's very spooky, I blind myself.